It's now time to hit the recruiting trail here on Recruiting Insider and catch up with the fellas running our recruiting affiliates off of ESPN.com. And we start out on the West Coast with Gary Paskowitz from WeAreSC.com. And Gary, as I understand this, no official visits for USC with Ohio State coming to town. What's the mindset behind that?
You're correct, Lowell. Kind of a surprising situation, I think, to most recruiting people. Basically, the coaches felt that with all the hoopla surrounding the game and so much time has been taken away, that they wouldn't have the time that they want to spend with each individual recruit who's on an official visit. So they're going to save the official visits till later in the year, but make no mistake about it. There are going to be so many players on unofficial visits from the class of 2009 and 2010. There's going to be no shortage of top recruits at the game this Saturday.
Well, Gary, most programs across the nation, if they had a big marquee game like this with Ohio State coming to town, they'd have those official visits left and right. I know you said there's going to be a lot of unofficials there, but what does this say just about the power that is the USC recruiting machine?
It is an interesting scenario. I mean, I've never really heard of this before, to be honest, with such a big game. And so it's, I guess, a little bit of a risk. But if you're Pete Carroll, he hasn't made too many mistakes in the recruiting game so far in the last couple of years. So it does speak to the fact that they can hold off to later in the year and then kind of let this game go without having the official visits. It's a very interesting scenario right now.
Well, Gary, thank you so much for the knowledge. That is Gary Paskowitz. You can catch him on WeAreSC.com. Let's now catch up to Steve Helwagen, publisher of Bucknuts.com. And Steve, you got the Buckeyes going to the West Coast. Right now ranked number 2 in the ESPNU recruiting rankings behind USC. How much work is left for the Buckeyes this season?
Well, Ohio State has 25 verbal commitments already for 2009, and 7 of those guys are ESPN top 150 guys, including Jamal Berry, the big running back that they just got out of Florida last week, picked Ohio State over the likes of Florida, Miami, and LSU. So most of the hay is in the barn for Ohio State. They've got a few guys like Marcus Hall, an offensive lineman from Cleveland Glenville, who is still considering Ohio State. There's a guy, Corey Adams, a defensive tackle, from Arizona, who's looking at Ohio State and USC. So that's a guy whose decision may hinge on what happens here on Saturday, but certainly the Buckeyes have got a lot of their recruiting work already done for 2009.
So as you said, the hay is in the barn this season pretty much for the Buckeyes. But what can this game against USC mean for the class of 2010?
Definitely this has an impact. As you think about it, this game is important in the context of this season, so that Ohio State, if they're able to go out to USC and pull off a win, would be positioned to play for the national championship for the 3rd straight year. And I think that Jim Tressel and his staff are selling kids on the idea that you can play in big games like this game against USC or the Michigan game or games on down the line with Miami of Florida and so on. And I think that this game certainly means that, and will pay huge dividends if the Buckeyes can win this game for their 2010 effort, their 2011 effort. They've already offered a handful of guys for 2010. They're starting to get some ideas on where they want to go with that class. And with 2009 wrapped up, that only makes sense to work ahead on next year.
Well, Steve, thank you so much for the knowledge, and we'll check you out on Bucknuts.com. And finally, Scott Raboulet from